I imagine a lot of you are in this particular scenario where you have a test, maybe it is scanned, maybe it is a digital test, and you're now trying to figure out how do I get it into Blackboard and deliverable as a test in Blackboard. Well, unfortunately for you, it's not straightforward, and so in this video we're going to cover the different kinds of methods of converting a test like this into a test that you can deliver in Blackboard. Before I get started, I want to point out that I created a website for a previous faculty training session that I did about a year ago, and this is online, and I will be providing the link for this in the description below. Of course, you can also see the link up here. But this site contains information about how to convert Word documents and other exam formats into formats that can be uploaded into Blackboard. And so as you scroll down, you can see I have a lot of information about how to convert different exams, also about best practices and a few other things that might even be ACC specific. But please feel free to check it out. Look at the website. I've got links to videos, I've got instructions, but of course I will be covering a lot of this in this video. If we start from a Word document test like I showed you at the very beginning of this video, there are four primary ways of converting that document and getting it into Blackboard. It includes formatting that Word document or an Excel file into a text document that can be formatted properly and then imported into Blackboard. There's test generator programs that can do this automatically. There are third-party programs, and then finally there's Respondus. Now there's a variety of potentially other ways of doing this, but these are four of the major ways in which we do it here at ACC and what I am familiar with. We're not going to talk about Respondus simply because that in itself would take a whole another hour to explain. Also, it's another program that you'd have to become familiar with, and I think that defeats the purpose of trying to get this done in a hurry and get it up into Blackboard. Respondus is a pretty powerful software package that is available to all staff and faculty at ACC for free. You can check out the website that I mentioned and linked earlier. It does have links about how to request Respondus and get it onto your home computer. It's a great way of making tests and then importing those or exporting those tests into Blackboard easily. But I know that a lot of you probably don't have much time to learn a new program, and so we're going to move on from there. The first method we're going to talk about today is formatting the Word document in a particular way that we can import into Excel and eventually get into Blackboard, or we can do this as well through a third-party program, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But as far as directly formatting a Word document that can be imported into Blackboard, the advantages are that you can do this on existing tests fairly quickly once you know how to do it. Although there are some tricks that I'm going to show you that will speed this up. And you can generate new questions quickly. Actually, if you know what you're doing, you can copy and paste and make new questions very quickly. A disadvantage is there is an initial learning curve, and hopefully I'm going to help speed that up a little bit. There is a limitation to certain question types. You can't do all question types. For instance, you can't do a hotspot through this method. You also cannot make image questions directly this way. You will have to go into Blackboard and make those separately or secondarily. And then of course you are still going to have to go through all of your questions in Blackboard to make sure that the correct answers are selected and that there aren't any mistakes. Then we'll look at test generator programs, which can be very powerful for you. In particular, as we look at the advantages, one, test banks, these test generators are usually coming from companies that have test banks with them, so oftentimes you can use their questions. Of course, we all know that sometimes those test bank questions have to be modified themselves or sorted through to make sure we're using good ones. The programs are often easy to use, and you can oftentimes even use questions that have images in them this way. The test programs or test generator programs are going to encode this data a little bit differently. It's something that we wouldn't be able to do easily ourselves. but fortunately you'll just be able to save our test as a particular format that we'll simply upload into Blackboard. I'm going to show you today one from Pearson called TestGen, since it's one of the more common ones, and how to use that. Disadvantages would include that you may not have a particular test generator available for your particular text that you use in class. Test banks may not be available for your text either, and it doesn't always properly format questions. You often have to go and check those formats secondarily to make sure it's being delivered correctly. And then finally, the third-party program. We're going to find that this is actually a pretty easy method to convert questions from your Word document, and it's going to take less editing as well to do this. So this is going to be a pretty good method as far as its ease of use. It's also going to reduce overall the amount of editing you have to do to the original document as compared to the first method we just talked about. And then the disadvantages are that each program, each third-party program, and these are third-party programs we're going to find online, so you're not going to have to download anything new. You're going to be able to upload your questions online and get a format that then you can upload to Blackboard. So each of the different programs has a slightly different format that it might use. I'm going to show you one and show you its format, so I'm going to encourage you to use it simply because it's one that we're using in the video, and it's also pretty easy to use. One of the other disadvantages is that not every third-party program has the same formatting, and there may be different limitations between different formats. So we'll address that as we look at the one that I'm going to show you or demonstrate to you today. In the first method, the basic idea will be to convert our exam into a text format that is tab delimited and has a certain format to allow Blackboard to recognize each question type. What you're looking at is an Excel file, and this is actually a good way to generate a text file that will be tab delimited, because essentially we're going to treat each cell as data, and then when we save this as a text file, it's going to treat each column as a separated from each other column by a tab. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here though. Here's an example file of different question types, for instance multiple choice, multiple answer, true false, essay, and so forth, and this is the general format for that. So for instance, in a multiple choice question, you would tag your multiple choice question with MC, you'd have your question, you'd have an answer, whether it's correct or not, an answer, whether it's incorrect or not, and so forth, and you can keep going and add several of these. But you always have to have an answer and then whether or not it's correct or incorrect. And so you can find a link to this format on the website I mentioned before that I made for training. There's also a good site for this. Blackboard has a help site, and it has, and I'll link this link into the description below as well. And this one goes over the different formats as you scroll down. For instance, it has a nice table showing you the different formats and giving you an example of how each of these formats works. And so the idea is to convert your document into this type. Now, you could copy and paste individual piece in there, but I'm going to simplify this a little bit for you. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through what I have found to be the fastest method to convert these tests into a format that we can use in this way. So one of the things that we need to do is we need to kind of triage our test here and determine which questions we can use and which ones we cannot. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit here, and I'm going to look at this exam. And as I look, most of this is multiple choice, but as I get towards the bottom, I have a number of questions that I might be able to use, but currently it's going to take me a little bit more work to convert them. So I have 60 or so multiple choice questions, and I'm going to try to convert those at the moment. The first thing I need to do is I need to save this document as something else so that I don't ruin this document. And so I'm going to, this is exam word number 1, and I'm going to add an extension to this, converted for Excel. Okay, I could name it whatever I want. I just want to make a copy of it that I can now mess with and not destroy the original. Okay, so I'm currently in that new file. I'm going to delete the rest of these. Now I might be able to use all or any or all of these images for questions like I showed you in the last video about adding images to question types. But now I've just isolated the multiple choice. Let me scroll up. I'm going to get rid of some of this extraneous text like the header. I just don't need it, and it can be distracting trying to figure everything out. I'm going to get rid of anything that's not a test question. Not necessarily required to do that, but I like to kind of clean up what I'm looking at. And I might also clean up something like this where I see a big space in my test. Okay, so one of the things that you should notice in Excel, there are no numbers here. There's not a number 1, there's not an A or a B here with regards to the question types. So I want to get rid of those in my document. So I go back to my Word document, and that's easily accomplished. I'm going to go ahead and select all, and I'm going to click on the numbering, and I have to do it a couple of times, and it'll eventually get rid of all the numbers. Alright, so I now have test questions without numbers. Now what I want to accomplish is I want to convert all of these questions into a question that has a tab between the question and all of its answers. Right? But I also don't want that tab to run over into the next question. Otherwise, when I save it as a text file and try to import it into Excel, it's going to treat it as all one big question. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple of things to help me, and I'm going to do a little trickery here. I'm going to first show the paragraph marks, and you can see that after every line here is a return. And you'll notice between questions there's 2 of them, 1 and 2 there. We're going to use that to our advantage. And so I want to convert these questions into a question with a space between the different questions still. Let me show you the problem here. If I want to go ahead and replace, I want to find and replace. Actually, I'm going to stop myself. I'm going to just use the simple method. I'm going to select all. And I don't even really have to do that. In fact, I'm not going to. It'll work either way. You can select them all or not. I'm going to go up here and click Find and Replace. Now I'm going to clear what I was doing earlier. And so let's say that I wanted to find all of the returns and then replace that with a tab. And we can certainly do that. And normally what you would see is when you firstly tap on or click on Replace, you would see this. Click on More. And I'm going to find returns, or in this case I'm going to find paragraph marks, and I'm going to replace them with a special tab, the tab character, and so that you can see that they have special designations here. I'm going to hit Replace All. Well, you can see that that creates a mess. Yes, it put a tab between everything, but now I can't tell when one question ends and one begins. So let's undo that. I'm going to do Control Z to undo that. And I'm going to, and actually before I do this, I want to make sure and scan my questions to make sure I'm not going to see any obvious problems. I need a format where there's a question and then a set of answers, and so far that seems to be the case, but as I scroll down, I know there are some examples in here where that's not the case. For instance, this question has a question and a list of things and then answers to put them in order. This question is not going to work well as a multiple choice, so I'm going to delete it. I want to make sure there's just one space between that question and the other one. I'm going to, I believe there's another one here. Yes, I see another one here. I'm going to delete those for now. And you notice I have an extra space here. Make sure you only have one space there, and you'll see why. Well, actually the reason is I'm going to be searching for 2 character marks and replacing them with something. Okay, so I have a test that I think I'm not going to have any problems with as I'm looking. And now I'm going to do a replace again. But the first replace I'm going to do is I'm going to find where there are 2 of these marks in a row, so I can either go do the special mark or I can just type it in. So I'm looking where there's 2 of these in a row, and so that's going to represent the place where I have, for instance, over here I have one there and one there at the beginning of the blank space. And I'm going to replace it. I can replace it with anything, but I want to mark it with something that I know I can find in a little bit. So I'm going to replace it with 5 X's. And this way, I don't think there's 5 X's anywhere else on the sheet. And I'm going to replace those 5 X's later. So let's replace all of those. Now it brought all the questions together. I'm not worried because each of those 5 X's marks where a new question begins. And now I can go and search for these paragraph marks where there's one of them, replace them with a tab character. I'm going to replace all. It looks messy like it did before, but now I have a method for separating each one of them. Now I'm going to find those 5 X's, and I'm going to replace them with 2 of those paragraph marks, returns essentially. And let's do that. And so what I've done is I have created separate questions that are separated by a return, and then they have the question is followed by a tab mark, and all of the answers are followed by a tab mark. Alright, I've done that. You can see that I basically converted 58 questions very quickly. I'm going to delete some of these dangling things at the end, but I've converted 58 questions into a format that I can now get into Excel. To do that, I need to save this document as a text file. So we're going to go and select text. Let me find it here. There we go, plain text. Let's name it as Excel text. I'm going to save. Just use the default. What's going to happen is when I open it up into Excel, it's going to ask if this is a tab delimited text, and of course we'll say yes. We're going to use the default. We're going to go ahead and hit yes, and now we can. I'm going to close this, and it'll ask me if I want to. I think no. Sometimes it asks me if I want to save it. I'm now going to open that file in Excel. And I'm going to open it in Excel. And the reason I need to open it in Excel now, even though I've got it in a text format, is I've got to add the answers. Okay, and so I'm going to go into the folders and find my. And I have to go over here to. Sorry, I need to find it right there. There it is. This is the text format. When I hit open, it's going to ask me about converting this. So this is delimited text. It's delimited by a tab, so we're good. And it's by a tab, and I'm just going to hit finish. Now I actually could have, instead of replacing those X's with 2 returns, I could have just done 1. It would have put them all on the same line. It's no big deal. I can go ahead and sort this and put them all on the same line. But you can see what it's done. It's put the questions all in the first column. It's put the first answer in the second column, and so on as I'm spreading this out. And so now I've got all of the various answers. I need to first, actually what I probably should do is go ahead and sort this, and I'm going to do that by just selecting all my columns, on my rows here. And I think there's, like I said, there's 58 questions. I'm going to go ahead and go to data and sort this from A to Z. And it'll get rid of those blank spaces. So you see I have 57 questions. I must have deleted one more. Okay, so obviously you're also going to have to check these questions as you're going. But now what I need to do is I need to add a few columns. I'm going to add a column here, for instance. I'm going to insert, and because this is going to be question type, and these are all multiple choice, so I'm just going to type in MMC. I'm going to click in this corner now and drag it down. I've now tagged all of these questions as a multiple choice question. And then I'm going to, after each one of these other columns, I need to insert another row, because now I need to designate each one of these as either incorrect or correct. And the easiest way to do this is going to be add incorrect to all of them, and then go and change the ones that are actually correct to correct. I'm just making sure how many of these I need to go over. So I'm going to add one more here. And I'm going to type in incorrect. I will click and drag down. I'm not going to do all these here for us today. I'll do it here, but I'm only going to convert a few of these to show you how to get it into Blackboard. And so as I do this for the other ones, let's go ahead and just do a few of them. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and hit Control C and copy this column and copy it over here, and Control V and copy it there as well. And I think I have one more. Right. Let me double check to make sure I don't have this. Oh, I do. I do have another answer, so I'm going to copy it there. Actually, I need to copy again. Control C. Going to Control V here. And I believe I have, yes, I had one more column. And actually, I'm going to leave that blank for now because I can just type in incorrect right here. And I want to make sure that I don't have any more answers out here. I've got a straggler down here. That's okay. We're going to delete that. I don't need to worry about it. Again, you would have to check over these questions. That's probably where my 58th question went. Okay, a little trick. It's a little hard to determine where your incorrect and correct answers are. And again, to simplify this, I'm just going to do the first 6 questions. So obviously you would have to do this for all of them. I'm going to go ahead and delete these for now, just because it'll simplify what we're doing. I'm going to select all, and I can do that here. And I can do a query here. I believe it's conditional formatting. And I can do a conditional formatting on this table, and I can say, I can highlight cell rules, and I can do something equal to, for instance, the format cells that are equal to, and I can say incorrect, and I can fill them with a light red fill, for instance. And then I can also add another one of these, and I can say correct, and I can fill that with, say, a green. Okay, and then what will happen, and you can see right now that all the incorrect ones are labeled red, and if I label something correct, so let's say a drop of blood returning to the heart from the head region went into the heart through which vessel, and so we would look for the correct answer. It would be the superior vena cava. We're going to label that as correct, and it'll turn it green. Now this is not going to have any effect on the test in Blackboard. I just do that because it helps me to visualize that I've got all of my answers. I've got the correct answers labeled for each one of those. So I'm going to pause here for a moment, and I'm going to label all of the correct answers, and then we'll go from there. Okay, and I'm back, and I have okay, and I'm back, and I have added the correct answers here, and I think I have everything set up. I've got my questions, they're all tagged multiple choice. I've got my correct ones entered here, and so we're now going to save this as a tab delimited text file as well. It's going to be text tab delimited. We're going to go ahead and hit save. It's going to ask us if we want to replace it, so we'll say yes, and we're ready now to import it into Blackboard. And so let's go to Blackboard. We're going to go to our pools. Now whenever you save something as a text file, you're going to import questions, but if you save it as a zip file, oftentimes it'll import it as a pool. Let me show you. For instance, in our pool, this is the pool that we made before. We wouldn't import a pool. That's usually going to be a zip file. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to go into our pool, and we're going to edit it, and we're going to upload questions. So so these are the questions that we made before, and we have, looks like 12 questions in here right now. We're going to upload questions. We're going to browse. We're going to go find this file. We're going to open, and we're going to hit submit. And we now have a number of other questions here. We have a total of 18 questions. let's go check them out. Let's go look at them. So here are our questions. You can see there's a multiple choice question. The right one is check marked. So this is, you would have to look over them. A couple of things can happen. As you can see, when I do it this way, sometimes it'll put these quotation marks around here. This has to do with the formatting and the number of tabs here. You can go in and correct that. So for instance, I might want to go into this question and correct that. But again, you can see that that might take a little bit of time. And that's just going to be a trial and error thing that you become familiar with and how to change this. So if I were to go back, for instance, and maybe look at, I'm going to go ahead and open up or look at this and see if there is anything that I can see right off the bat that's creating a problem. And I don't see anything except, no, I don't see why that's going to be the case. I don't see currently why it is saving it as something that will show up in quotation marks. But anyway, that does happen. I know that from a personal experience, and so I have to go in there and edit the test question and take out those quotation marks. That's just something that bothers me. It doesn't really affect the overall test. So that's how you would get in questions in this method, and admittedly this method seems a little bit laborious, and it is, and it takes a little time, but I can tell you that once you get used to this format, once you get used to how this works, I can start copying and pasting and moving things around very easily. For instance, if I just want to move stuff around, I can click and drag things and so forth. And so it does become very easy in this format to make new questions. So this is probably more ideal in making new questions than it is converting questions from an existing exam. But I wanted to show that to you first so that you understood in part that for questions to get imported into Blackboard, they can't just be copied and pasted. They actually have to be in a certain format to do that. Okay, let's next look at the next method, which is going to be using test bank generators to do this. While the first method took a little bit to explain, the next two will go a little faster. And depending upon what you have access to, you might find one of these other two more suited to your style or easier for you to do. So I've opened up TestGen, which is a pretty common test generator for Pearson products, and you can see I have a number of different test banks in here because of different classes that I have taught in the past. I'm going to use let's say Campbell here for a moment, or I should probably use the 9th edition, doesn't really matter. I'm going to make a test. Now the first thing over here is I'm going to make a web test, and so it's going to give me an option for different kinds of web for Blackboard. So if you're using a different platform, obviously you use a different format. We're going to do Blackboard, hit OK, and it's going to give us a blank slate here. And let's say that my test is over, part of it's over chapter 35. And I can scroll down, look at my various questions. These are mostly multiple choice, but as I get down, sorry, I'm going to have to scroll down here and make you a little motion sickness. I see some questions also have images, and so we're going to create a test here, a short one, that even has some images in it to see how well it does with importing those into Blackboard. So let's select this question. Let's click and drag it over. Let's drag a few more questions. Now you would also take a look at what question types you're dragging over. You would probably be more picky about which ones that you wanted to use. But let's just drag a handful. I'm going to shift click to select more than one. Okay, and I'm going to use those questions to import into Blackboard. And so when I'm done, and I'll just make sure to click over there, I'm going to go down and we're going to export. And we should select the export exam to Blackboard. I'm going to enter a name for the pool, so I'm going to say chapter 35 exam pool. And it's pretty much descriptive as well, so I'm going to enter the same description. I'm going to hit OK. Now it's going to create a zip file, and I'm going to put it in the folder I've been using. I'm going to put it in my video files that I'm making here. I'm going to put it into chapter 8 so I know where to find it. And I'm going to rename this zip file to chapter 35 exam pool. And I'm going to save. Alright, let's go then back to Blackboard. This time I'm going to go back to my pools, and instead of adding questions to this pool, I'm going to import a pool. And I'm going to browse my computer. And there's that chapter 35 example, the zip file. It has that little zipper on the folder. That's how I know it's a zip file. Hit open, and I'm going to hit submit. And so let's take a look. The package has been processed. I'm going to hit OK. And here's my exam 35 exam pool, or chapter 35 example. Let's go and look at it. Let's look at the edit. So I've got 6 questions here. Let's take a look at and see how it imported that image just fine. And so that's one of the things that's nice about the test generators, is they do a little bit of encoding, that they can put these images in there and get them into Blackboard as well. So look at these questions. Of course, I would also want to check over them. But as you can see, if I have access to a test pool through, let's say, a test generator, I know there's a number of different ones that have different generators, and my experience is that so far I have not run into one that can't export it as a Blackboard file, but that certainly could be the case if you happen to have one that doesn't have wide distribution. But in general, most of these test generator programs will be able to export into Blackboard. Okay, so if you have access to a test bank, this is a very good option to get a lot of questions in here. And I've also seen test banks that have multiple different kinds of questions, and they can easily get essays, short answers, all sorts of things into Blackboard. Okay, well, most of you are still thinking about your original Word document, and if you're thinking that first method was a little laborious, and the second method doesn't help you much because maybe you already have your test made. And so let's talk about the third method, and let's go back to our Word file, and we're going to go back and open up our original here, and I'm going to take off the paragraph marks, and we're going to use a third-party program in this last method. Now I want to go back to my web page for a moment. I'm going to scroll down because I'm going to go specifically to right here. There's a number of different Blackboard test generators, and I just recently found out that one that I had been using really isn't compatible with it anymore. It's Brightspace. But there's a few different ones out there. You can just look up Blackboard test generator, quiz generator, and find some of these. One of the ones I like is this Oklahoma Christian University Blackboard test generator because it's pretty straightforward. It uses a lot of the same formatting that Brightspace did, and it still works. And so when I go to that link, this is what it looks like. Pretty straightforward. What it wants you to do is it wants you to upload questions, and it will convert them for you. And so we're going to name this exam 1. And now I want to import questions here. Now there is a format, but that format may not be obvious to you right away. In fact, this little help thing doesn't really work. But what you can do, let's say you can see the different kinds of questions that you can ask here, or you can bring in here in export. You can create a sample question so that you can see the format. So the format for a multiple choice question is to have a number. You can actually have letters or numbers here for the answers, but as long as you have an asterisk in front of the correct answer, then it should be able to read that correctly. So let's go back to our Microsoft Word document. I'm going to do what I did before. I'm just going to get rid of some extraneous text here just because I don't want it to be in my way as I'm thinking about this. But I do have one problem here that is a little unanticipated. You'll notice that I cannot actually type in front of the letter. I need an asterisk in front of the letter for the correct answer. And it's not allowing me to do this because I have this as auto numbering and auto lettering. And so there's a simple way around this. I'm going to select, actually what I want to do too is I also want to delete the things that I did before. I'm going to delete all the short answer stuff and the images and get rid of that. I am going to copy though the rest of this text. I also want to delete things like this that questions that are not going to work well in this format. So I'll delete this one as well. But I really don't need to copy all of these. In fact, I'm again going to just copy the first 6, but I still need to be able to put an asterisk in front of them. Now, I could copy these and just paste them in and do it in the third-party program. So, for instance, I could copy this. Let's copy the first 4, for instance. Actually, I'm just going to do the first 3. And I can Control-C copy. I can go to... I'm going to clear the test questions here. I'm going to paste, Control-V, and now I can go and add an asterisk in front of the correct answer. Alright, and so as I do so, I'm going to do it here. Let's see. I'm indicating the correct answer in each one of these. Okay, I've got those 3 questions, and then I can go to generate test questions. It'll tell me if it's green, it tells me that I did it right. If it turns red, you can hover over it and it'll tell you that there's something wrong with it. So at this point, I've got my 3 questions here. Now, like I said, it's a little laborious to do this way because I have to go into this program and go down. Instead, what I can do, and I'm going to clear this, clear it out. I'm going to go back to my Word file. I can copy this whole thing and I can Control-C copy. Now when I want to, and I'm going to do a hard control here to go to a new page, I'm going to right click and I'm going to copy or paste the text only. By doing that, if I go up to where it began, you can notice now that I can type in front of the letter. So in this case, I can indicate my correct answers. In fact, in this case, I'm going to just delete my other stuff. I'm going to delete my original so that I just have my copied material. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to take my test. I'm going to go take it. I'm going to indicate what are the correct answers. And as you can see, by doing this is just going to be easier when you're looking at your exam and you're making sure that you have all of the correct questions, and you can take your time marking this up with the correct answers. And then when you're done, you just copy, go to your program, paste. I should be ready now to generate test questions. They all worked. I should now be able to then... Now, you can download test questions, but this is going to work better for us to download question pool. You can actually do it both ways. If you download test questions, you have to upload them inside of a pool. If I download a question pool, I can upload them as a pool. So I'm going to download it as a pool. I'm going to save it here as exam 1 question pool. You'll notice it's a zipped file. Hit save. I'm going to go back to Blackboard. I'm going to import a pool. I'm going to browse my computer, and there is my exam 1 question pool. I'm going to hit submit. It's going to take a moment, and we're going to hit OK. There was a warning there, but it looks like everything turned out fine. Here's exam 1, my 3 questions. I'm going to edit and look at them, make sure everything looks good. So it added a check mark in the right place, and so my questions look good. So this is a pretty easy way. It's a faster method because I don't have to do all of the shenanigans to get this formatted correctly. Basically, I just get it into a simple format, make sure I'm marking the right answer, and then I'm going to copy and paste it into my third-party program, and then I will, such as, oops, got to find the right one, and then I can do all of them at once. I can do all 58, and it'll tell you which one's converted properly or not. Download it as a pool and then upload it. So I think those are 3 methods by which you can get questions into Blackboard quickly. For my money, the last method, the third-party program, is going to be the best for an already existing exam. I think the second method is great if you have access to a test bank because it's quick and easy. And then if you're making new questions to put into Blackboard, you have one of two choices. You can either go into Blackboard and make the questions directly, or you can do it through an Excel program and format it correctly, which can go very quickly if you are familiar with the format. So those are the four primary methods. One we covered in the last video and the three that we covered in this video. Anyway, if you have any questions, please be sure to email me, and if you have any ideas about other testing formats that you want to take a look at, you can also let me know that as well. I hope you enjoyed, and I will talk to you in the next chapter.